Good morning, everybody, and welcome. We've got many people still joining, so I'm going to give it a minute or two while we're waiting for more people to join, and then we'll officially start the meeting. Thank you. In the meantime, you're welcome to drop us a message in the chat box to introduce yourselves. Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I hope you're having a lovely morning. My name is Helene Krause. I'm serving on the LaRSSA Council, and it's my pleasure to introduce you this morning to our team who's going to talk about insights from the Living Catchments Learning Exchange. So the Living Catchments Programme is a 3-year initiative that responds directly to the challenges of water insecurity in our country, and it aims to bring people together from diverse backgrounds, so communities, traditional leaders, scientists, government, and the private sector, and they're all working together to create solutions for protecting and restoring our catchments. So I'm really looking forward to learning from these three ladies. I'll give you a quick introduction as well, and then I'm going to hand over to Dansile. So we've got the first speaker is going to be Dansile Cindy from SANBI. She's also serving as a council member of LaRSSA. She's a principal specialist in ecological infrastructure and biodiversity information and policy advice at SANBI. She's then going to hand over to Dr. Pearl Gola, also from SANBI, and she's serving currently as the Director of Biodiversity Mainstreaming. And then our past president of LaRSSA, Gwen Gosney, is going to finish off the discussion. So Gwen is currently the environmental manager of the Trans-Caledon Tunnel Authority. And yes, so without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Dansile. Welcome, everyone. I hope you enjoy this. And while we're going, you're welcome to drop questions in the Q&A chat box. Thank you.
Good morning, everyone. I hope I am audible. May I just get a sense check of whether I'm audible? Can you all hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes, we
All
can.
good. Thank you, Dansile.
Oh, okay. Can you see what I'm sharing?
Absolutely. And there's lots of thumbs up on their way in. So yeah, we're all good. Good to go.
All right. I just want to put a face on the voice, and I just want to say thank you to everyone that managed to join us today in this webinar or web chat. And I'm also just grateful to the Land Rehabilitation Society of Southern Africa, the LaRSSA. So this web chat is actually made possible by the collective efforts between the Land Rehabilitation Society of Southern Africa, the South African National Biodiversity Institute, as well as the Trans-Caledon Tunnel Authority, TCTA. So really, what we are aiming to share with you guys today is highlighting some of the promising community-centered initiatives that are happening in the Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal province. These activities are happening at Umkomazi catchment as well as Umzimvubu catchment. As Helene has mentioned earlier on, this work is also the work that is funded by the Living Catchments Programme that is led by SANBI and is funded by the Department of Science, Technology and Innovation. And I'm really excited to be here in the midst of such a brave crowd, and also the ladies that will be speaking to us today. I have Dr. Pearl Gola and Gwen Gusni. I'm just going to tell you a brief bio on Dr. Pearl. She is the Director for Biodiversity Mainstreaming at SANBI. She holds a PhD in Water Resource Science from Rhodes University, a master's degree in zoology from the University of Stellenbosch, and her honors in zoology from the University of Port Elizabeth. Dr. Gola also serves in different capacities at the Institute for Water Research at Rhodes, at National Research Foundation, the Institute of Natural Resources, and at SANBI. She also is working across science policy practice continuum. She has extensive experience in environmental and water resource management. Her experience at SANBI includes the implementation of the ecological infrastructure for water security projects, where she was a coordinator of the Umgeni ecological partnership in KZN as a senior specialist on ecological infrastructure. And also she played a role in providing strategic guidance and technical inputs on policies, strategies related to the water and ecological infrastructure. And now she holds the portfolio of leading the biodiversity mainstreaming work at SANBI. That is just a few words on who Dr. Gola is. And what I also want to share with you is who Gwen Gosney is, besides being our previous president at LaRSSA. Gwen holds a master's degree in environmental management from the University of Free State and a BTech degree in nature conservation from the Cape Peninsula University of Technology. She has been an environmental manager with CCTA for over 15 years and is long-serving member of the Land Rehabilitation Society of Southern Africa. Her passion, she's fueled both by her passion for both nature and people, and has spent 25 years working and studying through the University of Life. This experience has shaped her unique perspective and deep appreciation for the interrelational between people, the built environment, and nature. I think these are two amazing women that we will be engaging with today, and I am very honored to be introducing them to you. I'm going to then hand over to Dr. Gola to just take us through the first presentation of this web chat. Dr. Gola, are you ready?
Thanks, Tansile.
There you go. Welcome.
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Pearl Gola, as Tansile has already mentioned. So I'm not gonna go into she's given a bio, so there's no need for me to introduce myself. So I'll just go to the next slide. Okay, so as Tansile mentioned, I come from the National Biodiversity, South African National Biodiversity Institute, SANBI. And then I thought I should start with what we do at SANBI. So what we do at SANBI really is a lot of things. We do a lot of foundations and of biodiversity. So that speaks to our collections, species collections, the taxonomy work that we do, the inventory of our species collections, the maps, classification work for ecosystems and species. So there is that foundational work that we do, and that work builds us into what we call building biodiversity knowledge. So our assessments that we do at SANBI. So there's the National Biodiversity Assessment that we do every 5 years. There is the status for invasive species that we also do every couple of years. We look at trends, we do some monitoring and some modeling. And then that also builds us up into the work that we do around science, into policy. So all of this foundational science that SANBI does is then channeled into policy. But the way that we do that is we turn the science into information, information that can be used in planning, it can be used in policy advice, and it can be used in modelings and in models and tools that are used to inform policy. And then above that, all of that work into policy does not mean anything if it doesn't really help with improving service delivery, job creation, and human well-being. That's where biodiversity mainstreaming is. It really helps us take our science into the policy and practice space. And this is basically a process of embedding biodiversity considerations into policies, strategies, practices in key sectors in our country that impact or are impacted on by biodiversity. So I thought I should start there because I don't think everybody knows what the South African National Biodiversity Institute does. And I think the most important thing is that we've got gardens that are windows of our biodiversity in the country. And so our national botanical gardens are windows of biodiversity in our country. You can visit any one of them where you get to interact with the biodiversity. And obviously at the heart of what we do is human capital development, because we have to have people that do the work. So we are really concentrating on how we develop our human capacity in the institution. Thank you. Next slide, please. Right, so I'm going to be talking about the Living Catchments Programme, which is a project that the South African National Biodiversity Institute is leading. Our funding partner in this work is the Science Department of Science, DSTI, Science, Technology and Innovation. And we also have our partners, the Water Research Commission, Department of Agriculture, and Department of Water and Sanitation as implementing partners in this project. So I'm going to tell you a little bit about this project. We started with this project in October 2024, and it will go on until September 2027. And it's a build-up from a previous project that we did called the Living Catchments Project that was also funded by the Department of Science and Innovation. So this is what I'm going to be talking about today. Next slide, please. Right, so the Living Catchments Programme is a 3-year program, as I've mentioned, and what you're trying to do with this program in terms of its objectives is, one, to support partnerships for learning across the landscapes, and particularly district municipalities, so that we can have sustainable partnerships and co-create new ones if we can in other areas. We also want to be developing new skills and generate new knowledge and contribute to social justice and economic development. And we want to be integrating Indigenous knowledge systems into land and water management practices so that we can support national biodiversity objectives. And we want to look at degraded ecosystems that are under effective restoration to enhance biodiversity and ecosystem function and services so that we can have ecological integrity and connectivity. Next slide, please. Right, so where do we work in this project? We work across 3 district municipalities, the Alfred Nzo district in the Eastern Cape, Ehlanzeni in Mpumalanga, and Vembe district in Limpopo. And all of these 3 districts are really within strategic water source areas. And I think strategic water source areas are defined in this country and as those areas that are our water factories. So they deliver a lot of water to this country. So they're 10% of the surface area of the country that delivers water to 50% of the population of this country. So they're really important for the country's water supply. So all of these three district municipalities that we're working in are within those strategic water source areas, which makes water security really important for this work that we are doing. Next slide, please. So the work of the Living Catchments Programme is also underpinned by, us contributing to the policy landscape, particularly the international policy. So recently we've had the Coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework that really seeks to respond to the global assessment report of biodiversity and ecosystem services. And it really acknowledges the important roles and contributions of Indigenous peoples and local communities as custodians of biodiversity and partners in the conservation, restoration, and sustainable use. So what we want to do is to also be contributing to that. And the framework's implementation must also ensure that the rights, knowledge, including traditional knowledge associated with biodiversity, innovations, worldviews, values, and practices of Indigenous peoples and local communities are respected and documented and preserved through free and prior informed consent. So we want to really be working with our local communities so that as the holders of this traditional knowledge and local knowledge, they really are contributing to the broader biodiversity knowledge in the country. And the work also contributes to the National Development Plan and the work that the country is contributing towards the SDGs. So water, sanitation and health and education, environmental sustainability and biodiversity, and also inclusive economic growth and community empowerment, as well as science and innovations as drivers of equality. So we want to be contributing into the policy landscape through practical solutions on the ground. Next slide, please. So there's also the white paper on the conservation and sustainable use of South Africa's biodiversity, which is my favorite. So this emphasizes the importance of integrating environmental, social, and economic elements to achieve sustainable development. And the white paper also recognizes an integrative and collaborative, inclusive, and participatory approach as a framework for action to address threats to biological diversity. It also puts responsibility in terms of a range of stakeholders being involved, including but not limited to traditional leaders, traditional health practitioners, communities, private landowners, industries, academia, everyone being involved in a sort of all government and all society approach. And there are a number of goals that the white paper puts forward, and this work wants to be contributing to the white paper as well. Next slide, please. And in doing our work on the ground, particularly in ecological restoration, we also aim to be aligning with the global standards so that our work is really recognized and contributes to the Coming Montreal Global Biodiversity Framework. Because if we don't do that, then we do all of this work locally and we are not really able to report on it in the international stages. So it looks like South Africa is not doing anything, whereas we're doing a lot, and a lot of work really happens on the ground with our communities, and this is what we are trying to do. We are trying to make sure that for the purposes of the GBF, effective restoration that is defined in terms of its standards is also how we work with our people when we do our ecological restoration on the ground. Next slide, please. Right, so the Living Catchments Programme, we have a theory of change that guides our work. So we want to be convening catchment-based communities of practice, so that we can have integrated scientific research and Indigenous knowledge systems, and we create partnerships by doing that for learning across catchments and district municipalities that we work into. And we also want to be supporting catchment partnerships that are on the go as learning platforms and other learning platforms like LaRSSA. So we see LaRSSA as a learning platform of practitioners in the land rehabilitation space, and we want to be in support of communities of practice like LaRSSA in any way that we can, and contribute to that by leveraging resources, particularly for catchment management, so that we can use blended finance models that foster collaboration between researchers, practitioners, SMMEs in the private sector, and also government. So that we can develop new skills and generate new knowledge and contribute to social justice and economic development. And lastly, we also want to support implementation of various interventions and capacity building, so that we can look at agroecological initiatives, data and information management, and restoration of ecological infrastructure initiatives. Such that we achieve ecosystem recovery, which ensures that ecosystem services are continuously delivered to people, and prevent further degradation of ecological infrastructure. So that is essentially what our theory of change in this program of work is about, the things that we want to be achieving. And how we achieve this in the program. For example, how we support partnerships for learning across landscapes and district municipalities. We've got what we call the catchment-based indaba. So this is a platform or a learning platform that we convene as SANBI with our partners every 2 years. It's a platform for sharing information and experiences across catchments in this country. And it's also for peer learning across various catchments. And the great part about the catchment-based indaba is that it's co-resourced by our partners. So SANBI, yes, is leading and convening the catchment-based indaba, but all of our partners come together to co-resource in their skills, facilitation skills, presentation skills, and also in monetary terms. And planning of the catchment-based indaba. So it really is a hands-on deck approach that we use to actually plan the catchment-based indaba every 2 years. We've had one last year. We're not having one this year, and we hope we're gonna be having one next year. And we also support our catchment partnerships, such as the Mzimvubu Catchment Partnership and the Umgeni Ecological Infrastructure Partnership, Umkumazi Working Group, and all of the other, catchment partnerships across the country. The program really supports those partnerships, because we see that they use a source-to-sea approach in terms of catchment management, and that's really important for us to understand how water flows. And we also do this by supporting young people, the youth, particularly in our communities, and we call this youth our eco-champs or enviro-champs, depending on where you are in the country. So we support these youth in terms of capacitating them with citizen science tools, so that they can assist us with citizen science monitoring. For example, we've had youth that have been doing MINISAS, aquatic ecosystem monitoring. Others have been helping us with identifying springs, doing hydrosensors on our springs. We've had BioBlitz, where our youth are identifying species all across the landscapes, and there's also ecotourism and local local water resources. And then we also have an objective that we're trying to achieve, which is looking at degraded ecosystems that are under effective restoration to enhance biodiversity. So This looks at the restoration activities that we have on the ground that we support. There's education and awareness in the webinars like this one. We've had conference presentations that we've done, attended TED Talks and TED Tours to just facilitate learning and also SMME development, looking at rangeland stewardship with our eco rangers, solid waste management with NEPI initiatives in the Mzimvubu catchment. So there's a wide range of activities that we work with our partners to support. And then the other thing that we do is developing new skills to generate new knowledge and contribute to social justice. So we really are big on our youth. So we host youth learning exchanges. So that we facilitate peer learning amongst our youth, youth that comes from different catchments, that have different expertise and skills, so that they can get together and talk about their experiences and challenges and opportunities. We also do community-based capacity development with our traditional authorities that we engage with and learn from. And we also have learning exchanges like the one we're talking about today across our catchment and also facilitating conversations with traditional authorities across catchments. There's also, some training that we do in terms of spring assessment, wetland monitoring, as I said, aquatic monitoring. We also look at professional development, particularly of our young people, and look at how they want, where they want to go, as professionals. And there are also solid waste management initiatives, looking at stories of change so that these young people can understand, how they have changed over time, and they tell their own stories in terms of presentations and videos, and also report writing. We would like to encourage young people to write their stories so that they are able to publish newsletter articles so that the work that they do is known out there. Next slide, please. Lastly, we want to be looking at integration of Indigenous knowledge system into land and water management for this project. So having dedicated capacity development sessions, particularly with traditional health practitioners. Traditional health practitioners really use our water resources a lot, and we're trying to help them to understand how water works, our water resources, and so that they can be able to take care of the water resources. We want them to understand that the monitoring part of our water resources. So we've had workshops training them on MINISAS and talking about just general water resource management with them, and learning and sharing in those workshops. In that context, then we've got what we call nature champs, which are youth in the traditional health practitioner space, and where we hold education and awareness, like I said, related to water resources, training on monitoring, and learning exchanges, and also having those stories of change from them, and we also trying to help them facilitate their own workshops so that they can have their own facilitation skills, and opportunities that we've really seen in this work of the Living Catchments Programme is especially working with traditional authorities. They to see how traditional authorities can take responsibility and accountability for the management of natural resources, because most of our rural landscapes are within these natural resources, and they use these natural resources, and also working with traditional practitioners to remind them of the importance of conserving natural resources for the benefit of their own practices, and looking at youth as ambassadors of and stewards of nature and biodiversity. Also, the other opportunity for this work is local institutional support across government, NPOs, NGOs, CBOs, also working with academia to align community priorities with research, so that we have research that really looks at human well-being and the needs of our people. And also the private sector, there are opportunities there in terms of partnership with the private sector and collaboration on investment in ecological infrastructures, rehabilitation and restoration, and also looking at environmental and governance, so that we can have sustainability for our natural resources. So that is my story, and that is where I end in terms of the Living Catchments Programme. I'm going to hand over to Dansile. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Kwala. Thank you, Pearl, for that. It's really great to see those opportunities and how this Living Catchments Programme work really tries to engage at a local community level. So as Pearl was saying, all that work that we are contributing towards there are different approaches that we use, it depends on the cases or the scenarios, and you find yourself that you need to be identifying and engaging with stakeholders, as the stakeholders were mentioned, doing workshops, training sessions. But with today's one is really about where we use the approach of making sure that we're establishing platforms or supporting those established platforms for dialogue and knowledge exchange between the different stakeholders in the landscape, to making sure that people are working together and no longer working on silos, especially in this work of rehabilitation and restoration of our natural resources. So we had that learning exchange between Eastern Cape and KwaZulu-Natal in March. As I mentioned, that we had a group of participants from both Umkomazi and Umzimvubu catchments. I can't believe I just said Umkomazi and Umzimvubu catchments. And what we really wanted to achieve with the learning exchange was looking at how do we intentionally integrate Indigenous knowledge systems into our land and water management practices. And then we had to figure out what is it that we want to be showcasing around ecosystem restoration. So we had activities and initiatives such as the brush packing that the partners in KZN are doing, where we had the Umzimvubu catchment participants going into Mkomazi to look at the work that they are doing in alien clearing, and also looked at some of the community enterprises such as the production of biochar, livestock feeds from the biomass generated from wattle clearing. We also had an opportunity to take the Umkomazi participants to Umzimvubu catchment to also look at how the Eastern Cape rangeland stewardship work that is led by the Conservation of South Africa, CSA, the work that they're doing in collaboration with Meet Naturally around mobile auctions around Eastern Cape, and I know also in Mpumalanga and a little bit of Limpopo that those mobile auctions are happening. And that program of work that is led by CSA is called the Heading for Health program, and also there's the Department of Agriculture that is involved in that work. So you can see that it's really about collective efforts and making sure that people are learning from each other and are working with each other. So what the participants that we had our traditional authorities from Umzimvubu catchment, from the Alfred Nzo district, which is one of the districts of the Living Catchments Programme. We also had our local non-government organization, non-profit organizations. Our community members were also invited and participated in the learning exchange, including the women in the landscape as well as our youth. We also had some of the KwaZulu-Natal leads organization of activities that are happening in the Umkomazi catchment, and also there were opportunities that also came up about in all this learning exchange that happened, the 3 days that people were together. We managed to also identify partnerships, development opportunities. We now have AvoVision, Institute of Natural Resources, Environmental and Rural Solutions, participating in LaRSSA, for instance. That wasn't going to happen if we did not intentionally make sure that we collaborate and we start talking with one another to make sure that we're really working in collaboration and as a collective, and also making sure that we do connect the different institutions in the landscape to make sure that we do have projects that are able to leverage resources from each other and avoid duplication of efforts in those projects that are co-created amongst or within institutions. And what were the key inputs from the observations and discussions during the learning exchange? It came out very strongly as how important rural communities are in catchment management, the work that they are doing in rehabilitation and restoration, and how they're protecting ecological infrastructure on communal land areas is really something that needs to be empowered as well as supported. And also integrating of job opportunities and livelihood improvement in the restoration of rehabilitation of ecological infrastructure in these rural landscapes. Is really about how do we make these initiatives and the work that we're doing in rehabilitation and restoration also bring about the improvement of livelihoods for the rural landscapes and the people that live in those, and also the sustainability around water supply for nature, for our current, which is us, and the future generations, because really what we do right now, these efforts that are being engaged on by the current generation is really in preparation for the future generation, so that they find it as much as we found it as this current generation from the previous generation, as intact as possible, you know. And also looking at the fact that we have climate change impacts. How do we improve our communities' resilience against climate change impacts for now and also in the near future? So with that being said, I want to bring in Gwen to now just also bring in as a participant, as well as her role as LaRSSA and her role at TCTA while she was part of the learning exchange in March. Gwen, are you ready to come in?
Morning, Dansile. I want to say good morning, listeners, but good morning, attendees. It's an absolute privilege to be able to work with you guys today, not only as LaRSSA and as part of TCTA, but with women like Dansile and Pearl. It's been many years that we've got to know each other. And yeah, Dansile was out of action for our last conference, which meant I had to engage very closely with Pearl. And it's growth and development that I can be so proud of, just seeing how LaRSSA is growing up in terms of bringing us all together and how people are starting to work together. I am from TCTA. I've been introduced, and I'm wearing 2 hats today because at TCTA we deal with many projects. If I can go to the next slide, please. We are there to make sure that we are putting in the infrastructure that enables water security. We've got all sorts of different scale of projects, mainly dams and pipelines, but we've also got some acid mine drainage treatment projects, and then historically, where necessary, some borehole projects around communities as well. Our website is there if you want to explore more of our projects. They're generally very long term, but as you can imagine, with doing water infrastructure in catchments, the catchments become very important. If we can just go to our next slide, please. Okay, she's going to walk me through this one because it's got animation on it. Sorry, Dansile. Basically, TCTA are there to enable water transfer. In South Africa, we all think about water as coming out of a tap in our cities and our provinces that are well, what do we call them, well modernized. Gauteng, for example, people do not realize where water in Gauteng comes from. If you're sitting in Johannesburg, you're opening your taps, you're flushing your toilet, that water is coming all the way from Lesotho. So the tunnels and pipelines and dams that are there to bring that water to your home are then created with very special project teams that are there to do it. TCTA is on the bulk infrastructure side. If you have a look at the little diagram at the bottom, we get directed from DWS. We build the infrastructure that brings the water through the bulk water boards to the municipalities and eventually to your taps. Once it's been through your taps and toilets, it ends up back in the rivers, flowing to Limpopo. So you can imagine that, as much as we don't think we have water reuse and water recycling in our country, almost everything that we use moves between catchments, whether it's interbasin transfer schemes or via our rivers after having been through our taps and toilets. It really is important. Water is life, and it really is something that we cannot do economic development without. My other hat is LaRSSA, and LaRSSA is all about connecting people, promoting land rehabilitation that is scientific, technically robust, economically viable, and most importantly, socially inclusive. We like to get our hands dirty, as the picture more than clearly shows. And it's really about what happens and the action on the ground. There's many different formats to our interactions. Some of the faces on these slides you will see when you attend our conference or our tech talks, but it really is all about our membership and building the networks and partnerships. Sometimes our learning is at a conference around a fire. Sometimes it's looking at best practice. This floating wetlands is being presented by a mining company at our conference. This is how we are trying to support them in doing what it is that needs to be done in the field to rehabilitate and restore our natural resources, not just our catchments, but any land or resources that have been degraded through our mere existence and operation on Earth. We've been across the border into Namibia. We've hosted workshops with the UN. We love our field trips, but most of all, we like partnering and taking hands with other people who are already active on the ground, doing their best to try and resolve some of the issues in our landscapes. The yellow T-shirt taking hands with Taran from Henop's Revival is Dansile. This is one of our post-conference tours, and it really has been a relationship that has kept growing. Great. Let's talk about this infrastructure stuff. We're talking about dams and pipelines when we build TCTA infrastructure and tunnels, and those are transporting the water, but the ecological infrastructure is just as important. So we're not talking about just built infrastructure, but ecological infrastructure too. We talk about the journey of water, but we need to have a close look at the real journey of water. Dansile, thank you. This particular picture is from the Ecological Infrastructure for Water Security project. I was on the steering committee, and I found this diagram to be most useful because it really does highlight the need and the connectivity between the ecological infrastructure, the built infrastructure, and the water user at the end of the day. I think what for me, though, is a pretty picture on paper is not always a pretty picture when we look out the window and onto the ground. We've got our beautiful catchments. We've got our water source areas. They are often highly forested, at least in the gullies and the valleys. But are they still indigenous vegetation, or is the vegetation there posing a problem? As we go down our watercourses, we notice that the landscapes in and around our watercourses become degraded and eroded. Often we put in what we believe to be good solutions, hard solutions that we think are going to help us manage these natural resources. But over time, we often find that they get washed out and degraded. At the end of the day, by the time the water flows through the city, this last picture on the end here is in Centurion, where we've really damaged the river to the point where it isn't really going to be a healthy estuary once it reaches the ocean. And I think this, for me, is why the real journey of water is so incredibly important. Next slide, please. We have to look at it and understand the realities of today. Our degrading catchments, we've got loads of people living in our rural areas trying to make a living off a absolutely degraded landscape that is washing away. Not all of our catchments are in the same condition, but they're fast heading that way if we don't improve our management practices and the way in which we integrate our infrastructure into the receiving environment. If we think about our infrastructure, we're not just talking about big dams and pipelines, we're talking about roads, the formal ones and the informal ones. We're talking about the little access roads, the big access roads that are basically washing away at the side, causing major losses of soil. The soil is going into our rivers, and our rivers are becoming highly silted. They're then going to our dams, and we're losing capacity in our dams. So the challenge really is how do we integrate and manage our ecological and our built infrastructure, not just our built water infrastructure, but all built infrastructure to properly integrate and sustain livelihoods. There's multiple challenges that we've spoken about, and I mean, I don't have to tell them to you. Most people in this room, if I have a look at where you're from, are either parts of industries that are causing damage, or they're part of the teams who are trying to work towards them. Better yet, many of us are from both sides. We're acknowledging that there is a water quality issue in our country. It's a major issue. We've got capacity constraints all over the show. We've got failing infrastructure that is really in need of major investment. But if we have a look at it, we also are struggling, and we've got this whole thing in South Africa, but we can't deal with the natural stuff now because we've got to look after the people first. We've got other priorities. And for me, the real success lies in understanding our priorities and our risks as opportunities. Constrained livelihoods, particularly in our catchments, but not just in our catchments, speak to unemployment, inaccessibility of markets where they can sell their goods and services, access to water, the quality of the land that they're trying to run cattle on and support livelihoods on, massive erosion that is washing away between the homes, and infestations of plants. So this impact slide is really quite something. But we have to go back and say, right, now it's time to look at solutions. Now it's time to get to know what's happening in our living catchments and how the rehabilitation efforts on the ground are starting to take shape. When I was invited to join the Learning Exchange, I had no clue what I was in for. I'd heard a lot of the stories. Each time that Pearl and Dansile or any one of the other representatives came and presented at LaRSSA, I would always say to them, okay, cool, that's nice, but now bring me the pictures of the people on the ground. And I think they eventually got tired of me saying this. So I decided to go and have a look. When I was invited to the Living Catchments Learning Exchange, it was something I really could not be more grateful for. This is just, well, I'm going to run through, sorry, Dansile, if you can go back. I'm going to go through the observations that I made while I was in the field, just visiting with the team, touring with the multiple people, this big group, as we went through the landscape and traveled together. There was so many stories in the vehicles, discussions around the interventions that we were visiting, and in the evenings. For me, the National Silt Management Strategy that I&R are working on was a very important body of work where they demonstrated how they used, they demonstrated how they used science and technology to identify the major sources of silt that are washing into our dams and causing problems. Using that technology, they went to the ground, found the people who were living in the landscapes that were eroding so badly, and decided to come up with sort of ground level solutions that really had benefits for the people on the ground, as well as in the longer term for the landscapes and for the dams. Thanks, Dansile. If we have a look at what we saw on the ground, there was local empowerment, there was engagement and ownership. People had been able to learn and grow through their involvement in the programs that were being implemented. They did not, John Makosh was explaining to us that they did not come and tell people what they needed to see on the ground. They came and they chatted and they said, well, in this area, what are the things that are your problems most? How can we work with you to put in solutions that are going to serve both of our interests? For me, that was extremely important. Driving up to the site, we were going through the river or just over the river when we noticed some citizen science people who were out sampling and doing their SAS monitoring. And it filled my heart to know that out of their own, these young people had gone out and carried on with the programs that they'd been taught and entrusted to implement. There are many cost constraints around what we can do, but if you have a look at this picture on the screen, you'll notice that there's a biochar kiln in the background, a very expensive piece of infrastructure that had been sponsored, but it was being run and operated by the community themselves, transforming the cleared wattle that they had in their landscape into biochar. And of course, biochar is an exploding and expanding market. And I think we've had a few tech talks on biochar in LaRSSA, just showing people how it is used. But here we were seeing how it is made. It was really interesting discussion. We can move along. Along the road, we met some very interesting people. Kwezi from Evo Vision is standing here with her black outfits and her brown bag, explaining to us the whole concept behind the Evo Vision charcoal or wattle to charcoal clearing programs that they have. This is all about seeing opportunity, having a vision, and empowering and challenging people to not wait for government or other parties to come along and tell you what to do, but rather take advantage and use what is around you, the biomass that is not welcome. How do we turn it into something that is for economic gain, that employs a wide variety of people with different skills, but all of these people are at ground-roots or grassroots level in the catchments dealing with the challenges of invasive species. In our next slide, please, Dansile. You can see a little bit of how the charcoal is made in these mobile kilns, clearing vast stands of wattle, converting the charcoal into different grades that is then actually through a network of collaboration and cooperation put into a market. I noticed that the people working here were very health and safety conscious, that this was a very mobile and scalable operation, and that it really was something that the people on the ground were excited about. The gentleman running the site that we were at got very excited when he was showing us how they pack the kilns, how they grade the charcoal at the end of it. But we were also having a look at the leftover fragments, these small little bits of charcoal that were left in piles where the kilns had been moved. And this is where there's growth for the next level, because they were looking at the opportunities around getting a machine to help them turn this into briquettes, really avoiding wastage and making sure that they get as much as they possibly can out of the charcoal that was being produced. One of the observations here, and something, sorry, just back one of the observations here is when we've had clearing, there's a lot of brush that can be packed and kept to help stabilize the landscape. But for me, it's very important that we have a look at the long-term upskilling of these teams to be able to look at how we improve the quality of the rehabilitation that is taking place in the areas where they've worked. So there's lots of opportunity there for further skills development and further expansion of the services that these teams can offer. Thanks. We had a look at this most amazing example of what used to be a wattle-infested and very deep erosion donga. It was washing soil away, and this is one of the interventions that the INR was working on, where they have employed the community team to come and clear wattle, using the wattle that has been cleared to run their team and their small business, which is around stabilizing this particular eroded area. They were using vetiver grass, they were using in situ wattle that they cleared, building it into silt fences, being made with brush packing, and catching the sediment and slowly but surely allowing the landscape to rebuild itself so that they can re-establish grazing. There's some, you can see some trials in the foreground here where we really are having a look, or we were learned about how these people have applied their knowledge and their insight to try different things. Experiment, explore options, and see what works. The gentleman with his hands in the air is sharing his story with the community leaders from other catchments in the hope that we can actually foster such programs in other areas, showing people that it's not necessary to have large investments in built infrastructure, and that you can actually use what's on the landscape. We talked about I heard Dansile talking about the mobile auctions, and they really didn't hit home until we were wandering through the hills, driving on the back streets, on the dirt roads, and then suddenly we came around a corner to see a hive of activity. Horses and cattle everywhere, a couple of herding dogs there as well, and to find this mobile pop-up auction where you would least expect it. This for me was a heartwarming example of how we really can bridge our gaps in understanding trade and value creation, the value chains that we're working with. Instead of having to take cattle with please excuse me one moment. Thank you so much. Just a tickle in the throat. Instead of these rural farmers, stock farmers needing to take their cattle to market in the big cities, often many hundreds of kilometers away, these guys had the opportunity to try and sell their cattle in the field in the rural pop-up auctions. It was an amazing experience to watch as the people from the homes and the homesteads in the landscape herded their cattle a short distance on horseback. They went into a row. Please, I always have great respect for how people keep track of whose is whose in these situations. The stock end up being sent through I almost want to say like a sort of a crush, getting evaluated. One side of the fence, we have the auctioneers on the back of the bakkie, and on the other side, we have some buyers who've come in from the cities to have a look at what cattle they can buy. The cattle in this rural landscape have been raised on this veld, and the veld has been managed through conservation agreements. And this is where organizations like Conservation SA and Herding for Health are coming to the fore to really improve the way in which, through conservation agreements, the way in which rural landscapes and rural grazing can be managed. What did we observe there? There were loads of different things, but there was a real benefit to the community in terms of participating in the conservation agreements, because it meant that there was less costs or commission involved or payable from the sale of their cattle. So they got the benefit of that. If they are in a situation where they had to travel far to get to market, there's no ways that these people could afford to say no to a price that was offered to them for their cows. But in this particular instance, if you didn't feel that you were getting value for your cow, you were allowed to not accept the offer from the bidder, and you were able then, without any major transport costs, to take your cattle home and work on them, feed them some more, and look after them, and so that they might be able to fetch a better price next year or at the next auction. So for me, there's a lot of potential in that landscape. Some of the challenges that we observed there is creating a better opportunity or more opportunity for people, the buyers, to come to these rural areas and select their cattle. There's opportunities to improve the way in which the herds are managed and their health is monitored, but therein lies opportunity to create extension officer programs or expand on what's already in the field. When we're talking about ecological infrastructure and transforming our landscapes and our catchments into a healthier state, we need to say, what is it that we've got that we can use that's at hand? We do not need large engineering solutions that get washed away, that get damaged. There's a place for them. But often in our watercourses and our catchments, when we're dealing with erosion, hard structures are not the way to go. If we've got things that we can make with the plants and the soils that are and the rocks that are already in situ, they are so much easier and more affordable. Observations from these areas where the brush packing is a real thing. It's got fantastic opportunities. There was so much work done and it's labor intensive, but to see before and after pictures of how these areas had grown up was most impressive. I see this slide just jumped out of kilter, but that's fine. It's not a problem. We've spoken about most of these things, but most importantly, it's about working with what you've got and maintaining it over time. Having a hands-on approach to maintaining our landscapes is a great way of creating work opportunities. Right, Jansile, next slide. Thank you. It's all about action at the grassroots and having the right impact. And it was during the learning exchange that I was sitting waiting at a stop go along the road and just observed how some person understood that packing stones in an erosion gully can help you control or contain the erosion. But it's all about having a bigger picture, having a look at the real landscape, understanding the context and the source of the problem, what's driving the erosion, so that we don't waste our effort by putting in small solutions in the wrong points, but that we really do go back to the source of the problems and the root causes and the drivers behind them when we're looking to come up with solutions. And it's about applying the right techniques and the right solutions at scale. Just in terms of me closing out the main takeaway principles that speak to the principles of green growth as well. Dansile, if you can just talk us through, there's pop-ups for each of the boxes. Sorry about the animation. So it's all about transforming behaviors and systems. We can have all the discussions that we want, but we need to, as we do with the just energy transition, we need to realize that we have a land use management transition to go through as well. When we're dealing with transforming people's mindsets and behaviors, our old ways of doing things, learning from the past, taking from the future, and coming up with new behaviors and new systems of land management and resource management to help us cope. Diversity and inclusivity, there is no one that is left behind. There is no one who cannot make a contribution. From the youngest to the oldest, we've got a lot to learn from each other. Diversity and inclusivity is not about making space for people because we have to, not about kind of figuring out what we might do with somebody who has a disability or what, yeah, it's all of these things. We've got to just realize that it's actually a benefit to have a diverse set of people involved. The more diverse we are in terms of our skills, our abilities, our interests, the better we are going to come up with the solutions. Otherwise, our landscapes are not going to transform. They are not going to change, and we're going to sit with our entrenched problems. Innovation and collaboration is not just something that we do at catchment level or within a society or an organization. It is a global challenge. There is a huge amount of international support and best practice out there that we need to run with, adopt, integrate. We don't have to carbon copy or copy paste. This is all about making it our own. Catchment level solutions, landscape level solutions that draw on international best practice, knowledge, and innovation. Innovation really is about a state of mind. It's not something that we can wait for somebody to teach us. This is about having the right attitude and really engaging with your surroundings, being creative. It was in Denmark during a learning exchange over there where we were looking at environmental and social sustainability, climate change, and the principles of green growth, where we learned about valuing people not so much for their resources, but their resourcefulness. What is it that we can do in our catchments with the people on the ground? We've got a huge number of graduates who get through the universities with degrees and do well, but then are lost when the job market does not have space for them. Many of these individuals end up living back in our rural landscape, in our catchments. They've got knowledge, they've got skill, they've got passion, and we need to start seeing these as resources that we can engage to improve the lives and the livelihoods in our catchments and in our conservation and restoration efforts, so that we are stabilizing our landscapes and protecting the natural resources that are already there. If anyone tells you they've had it easy, you'll probably find that they're struggling with reality of being a proper adult in this world, because adversity builds resilience. And if anything, the adversity and the scale of the challenges that we're facing in our catchments is bringing out the best in us when we realize it and we are prepared to take ownership of the fact that we need to do something to turn the tide of the erosion and the degradation in these catchments. We need to work together. and draw from our pain to make us stronger and really understand that it's not impossible to make a positive change. Last but not least, value and engage nature. The ecosystem services, the ecological infrastructure, the weather and the climate are all there. There are things that we need to embrace and understand deeply if we are to make a meaningful impact and turn and transform the behaviors and the land management systems that we're dealing with. It is critical that we work together and collaborate as groups of people, and I'm privileged beyond belief to have made a whole new suite of connections during the Living Catchments Learning Exchange. Thanks, Dansile. Next slide. Just a sample of some of the engagements, the discussions that we had, the people around the table, multiple languages, multiple home cultures, multiple different approaches and views. We've got people here who have a higher standing in their communities and within their traditional leadership structures. We've got business, we've got science, we've got academia, we've got conservation organizations, we've got infrastructure developers, and all of us are working together to better understand the catchments and the rehabilitation and the challenges that need to be overcome in these spaces. But what's encouraging for me is how willing people were to work with the champions who've been running many of these programs. And this is just a few of them. These are a few of the people who have really got their boots dirty, got their hands busy. We've got so many innovative people on the ground who really do bring so much diversity. The gentleman with the beautiful bright shirt up in the top corner, that's Prof. Sinagugu. We met him at a LaRSSA conference. If you remember the fireside picture when I introduced LaRSSA storytelling, telling us about his home in Pondoland and the Indigenous knowledge and their ways. We've got representatives like Paul at the bottom here with his Herding for Health t-shirt on from Conservation South Africa. Zanele and John Makosh from INR. We've got everybody in the room. There's so many. I'm going to get it wrong, but Noliso. I'm going to get it wrong. So it's there. Dansile, help me here. I'm going to get it wrong. The citizen science.
From the Department of Water and Sanitation.
Yes, but
the Living Catchments Programme team.
But the citizen science link. So sorry,
Yes.
I always struggle with that one.
And I mean,
yes, thank you. I didn't just meet her here. I met her on the side of a river in Centurion as well. We were doing river cleanups. So these people are all over the landscape. Kwezi at the bottom here, she's one of our keynote speakers for our conference this year, where she's going to talk to us about the Avo Vision model for developing small businesses on the ground. And Dansile, last but not least, you and the team at SANBI, you embracing your relationship, the long-term relationship that you're in with LaRSSA and SANBI, and you're really helping me and the rest of LaRSSA to build a proper understanding of the role players in the rehabilitation sector. It's not just about mines, it's about small businesses. Lumko with his technology, unfortunately we didn't have any of his drone pictures here, really just bringing to life the work that's happening on the ground and helping us to share it with you today. Right, I think from my side, that was quite a mouthful. I think we're going to open up for Q&A. I know Dansile just wants to do some thank yous, but let's just do the thank yous. While you're there, just think about the questions that you might have for any of us. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much, Gwen. That was amazing, and thank you for the shout out. Just to say, as the SANBI team that convenes and coordinates this communities of practice on the ground, we cannot do this without our partners. we cannot parachute ourselves into different landscapes without the people that are from the landscape. So I would like to really say a big thank you to our partners, the communities that welcomed us at the Upper Umkomazi catchment, our lead champions, NGOs, WWF, INR, Umngeni Uthukela Water, ECPTA, SEED, Conservation South Africa. Paul, I see you here. Shout out to you. Environmental and Rural Solutions, I see you, Ma. Our academia partners, University of KwaZulu-Natal, the two departments that are part of the Living Catchments Programme, Department of Agriculture and the Department of Water and Sanitation. And also a big thank you to LaRSSA to allowing us to really use their platform in engaging with what I usually call the unusual suspects, to make sure that we're not just preaching to the converted crew, but we also talk to the people that really needs to hear our stories without sharing our stories with each other all the time. With that being said, I'd like to just open up for questions and answers. I see Dr. Pell has already started answering some of the questions. And I would like to just say, Gustav, I see your quotes by Einstein. And if you want to maybe really talk about what is it that you I feel like you are a popcorn, you're ready to pop. Maybe Gustav can be given the first opportunity to come in, and then also to look at the people that were in the learning exchange, the people that were in the planning and the forefront. Please feel free to come in and assist the team with some of the questions. I see there's also a question from Joseph around the management and looking at what are the approaches. So we will then take hands from now. Gustav, do you want to come in?
Yes, thank my comment was just on often we try and fix the symptoms and then not the root causes. So to train the communities how to identify those root causes and not doing the same thing like it says bush encroachment or whatever it might be, cutting the trees or alien invasive, whatever, and doing it over and over, but not address why are these things here in the first place? How do we prevent it? So is there any practical tools where we've actually taught the communities how to, instead of the scientists identifying the root causes, teaching them how to identify the root causes? Thank you.
Thank you for that, Gustav. Just before I share my experience with that last bit of your comment and question, I'm just gonna check around the team members. Is there somebody that wants to share what Gustav is referring to? Because I think we are way past us teaching the community members on how to deal with the restoration and rehabilitation activities, or how to identify. They've been doing it. We are now the people that needs to go out there and really learn from our knowledge bearers that are in our communities, our elders that will sit you down and give you a story that will leave you with an amazement in your face to say, oh, wow, okay. So how do I integrate what I know to what I'm learning from my elderly people that are holding that indigenous knowledge with them? So go out there, colleagues. I'm just saying, go out there, colleagues. Being in your office in front of your laptop, you're not going to learn anything. You're not going to be able to contribute to any of those things that Pearl were talking about, because you're not listening. You are thinking all the way instead of using your 2 ears and your 1 mouth, as Putsino Koko will say it, to make sure that you empower yourself. Okay. All right. I am trying to look at Joseph's question. Pearl, Gwen, do you want to tackle Joseph's question? Or Kidiboni, do you want to come in? Please come in.
I would prefer if Paul, can you maybe tackle it? because the root causes there mostly it's overgrazing, uncontrolled grazing that is happening in these areas. So Paul, maybe if you can talk to what you guys are doing with the conservation agreement, how you do you get the communities to work together to to do the heading system, to do the bomber system and rehabilitate the rangeland. So and also at the same time you are learning with the communities and giving them incentive for practicing that. So I think Paul is better suited to explain it.
Okay. Thank you, Gidi. Paul, it's not me, it's Gidi. So please come in. Paul is from CSA and he was the one that was hosting that mobile auction that we were part of seeing during the learning exchange. Paul, are you still here? I saw you here. Where is Paul? Not Paul Avenat. Okay, I can't find Paul. Anybody from the Conservation South Africa team or ARC that wants to tackle this question? Otherwise,
Okay.
I'm gonna go. Sorry.
Okay, let me go because I wanted it to come from, sort of the horse's mouth because they're the people that are working on the ground, Paul and the CSA, and maybe is Mayor CC here from ERS. But anyway, so what they do is they go to the communities via working with the traditional authorities. And they get them to sort of work together to, manage their livestock as a collective. So they hire herders, and then they show them the impacts of like how the grazing has been reduced in the area. And like, through the signing of conservation agreement, the communities agree to implement a set of actions, which include rotational grazing, and which they do via electric fencing, where they'll put the animals in one place, and then as the dung action interacts with the soil, it improves the soil fertility so that when it rains, the soil is able to capture the rain without being washed away, erosion. So as in such, and then the grasses grow. So yeah, they take the communities through that journey. And as the communities see the grass improves, they also see that their livestock improving. And because of implementing that collective herding system, they're able to decide on areas where they graze instead of grazing all over the place. So and with that in mind, then the incentive that CSA brings is they bring the meat naturally to do the mobile auctions, and the communities, because of have been through challenges of not be able to sell their cattle, are able now to see that when those speculators come through the mobile auctions, they're able to teach them about what is required when one sells the animals, like the weight of the animal, the condition of the animal. So yeah, they see those results, and they know that the condition of the animal is dependent on them managing the grazing properly. So in that way, they're able to see that if they manage the grazing properly, and not allow the overgrazing to occur, then there's no bush encroachment, and then they are able to see the results at auction level. I don't know if I explained it properly.
Thank you, Gidi Boni from Department of Agriculture. I saw hearts coming through from some of the participants, and I saw Nosi's hand was up, and I like the fact that Gidi Boni made mention of meat naturally. Nosi, do you want to add something from what Gidi Boni just captured before I give the opportunity to Joseph to come in?
Okay. Hi, Penny.
Hi.
No, I think let's not take, because we don't have much time for the other questions. I was going to help her if she still wanted assistance, but she was fine.
Okay, no, not a problem. Thank you so much, Gidi. Joseph, your hand was up and it went down. Do you want to come in or are you covered?
I am covered. Thank you very much. And great work, great initiative, and really interesting. I think my main question is just for contact details to get involved. But I've left that in the chat. So thank you very much.
We'll definitely go back to some of the chats and the questions and the requests and some of the comments after this. And I saw Teresa did mention that we will be sharing the recording with everyone that is here from today. There's also a comment, if not a question, from Riyadh. Riyadh, Kiribone, I see your hand and Vusumuzi's hand. Is your hand in response to some of the questions that are in the chat, Gidi?
No, I wanted to add that there are videos. Now, the CSA has videos of the work that they do in the different landscape where they're working on. So yeah, and also in terms of alien clearing, remember that video that that is there that was presented at the Living Catchment base in Dava, where MECV is one of the traditional authorities, is explaining the changes that they have experienced through alien clearing, how they are now able to see water in the streams that were dry in the area. So if we can get permission from those particular organization to share the link of those videos with the audience. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that, Kiriboni. I think that also addresses Bongegile's question on how do we communicate this indigenous knowledge that we find ourselves being part of and able to talk to people about this. So some of the platforms that we use are the videos that are shared by the partners. Some of these things are done through tech talks and stories of change, and as well as our newsletters. Bongegile, I hope you have been covered. Vusumuzi Dlamini, please come in.
Hi, Sanbona. Good morning, everyone.
Sanbona.
I hope everyone is good, and just like to say thank you very much for this chat. It's been very informative. I've got a question here. I work under Oval Trust, or Wildlands Conservation Trust, under the Uthugela Marine Protected Area ecosystem-based adaptation project. I work along the Uthugela area in northern KZN, and my team under the components of ecosystem restoration. Well, we do a lot of work along the estuaries and along the coast, and within the forest, the dune forest along the coast as well. And I'd just like to ask, would private land owners, like, since we have so much sugarcane up north, and we know how much sugarcane can affect our environment as well, how do we actually approach those private land owners or those sugarcane farmers to actually try and engage with us or work with us in terms of trying to rehabilitate the riverbanks along the rivers, mainly being Umlalazi, Matikulu, Tugela, and all of those rivers? How do we actually invite those private landowners or those sugarcane farmers to actually join in? Because that's been quite a challenge that we've been facing as a team, to actually try and get them to at least work with us to try and minimize the amount of chemicals that they are using to actually that damages the water quality and all the animals within those rivers and estuaries. Thank you.
Thank you, Vusumozi. Vusumozi, you said you're from?
I'm from
KZ.
Wild Trust or Wildlands
Oh,
Conservation
KZN.
Trust. Yeah, yeah, KZN, Northern KZN.
Okay, thank you for that, Vusumozi. First things first, if you are not already participating in the Northern Drakensberg Collective, please make sure that you send your email into the chat. I want to give Pearl the opportunity to answer you, Vusi. We are left with 5 more minutes, but please, colleagues, participants, continue engaging in the chat, and we will try to try and respond to all of your requests and comments and questions. Come in, Pearl.
Thanks, Dee. So I think in terms of private landowners, and this is one of the things that we always think about, in terms of the stakeholder that we are trying to reach out to. So private landowners, for the most part, these are farmers, and farming is quite a labor-intensive process where they do need to be on the farm whole day. So they really can't, in the engagements that in conversations that we've had with them, is they really can't go and be at our meetings, for example, for the partnerships last the whole day. They can't really, go out and be out for the whole day. So we need to find a way of meeting people where they're at. They have their own learning spaces where they gather as farmers to discuss the issues that they have. So one of the ways of reaching out to them is actually getting invited to or trying to go to those spaces where you can find them gathered and start the conversation there. So sharing your work with them and trying to see where their synergies are with the work that they're already doing. And secondly, in the Umgeni, for example, there is a new initiative of trying to establish a biosphere reserve. And we found that it is actually the private landowners that are driving that process. So it's not like they're not interested in biodiversity conservation. They are. They just need a little bit of help in terms of how they go about that. And there's sort of like learning across learning between us as practitioners and them as farmers in terms of what it is that from a biodiversity perspective is important, and what are the activities that they do, and where do we meet each other halfway. So it really is about identifying spaces where you can start those conversations and taking it from there. And as Dansile mentioned, our catchment partnerships we found are really spaces where everybody is welcome to participate, and we get different views from private landowners, communal landowners, and so on and so on. So it really is about identifying the spaces and platforms where you can have those conversations with people, and it's not going to be the same for every catchment, because each catchment is unique and they have their own learning spaces.
Okay, thank you for that, Pearl, and thank you for everyone that participated and gave your time to be here with us. I'll just want to hand over to Helene to really just put us to and close at 2 minutes to 11, unless if there's some burning issue that someone wants to share, someone that is ready to pop, like a popcorn or a mushroom. This is your last chance, your last minutes to do that, or you can gladly put it in the chat. Thank you, everyone. Over to you, Helen, and bye, everyone.
Yes, thank you, everybody. I'm hoping that you also feel as inspired as I'm feeling right now. What a good news story. So I reckon now we want to see how we can replicate and expand this initiative. Dansile, just a side note, I copied all the questions there in the chat box. There could be other ones that might be worthwhile touching on outside of this discussion. But either way, we want to thank you all for your time, for attending, and again to the presenters, thanks for agreeing and making available your time to share this good news story with us. Thanks very much. And then to everyone who's added their email addresses, the people will get in touch with you, and Teresa will share the recording and the presentation later today. Thank you very much, everybody. I'm going to end the event now. Have a good day.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.